Number 10. Batman and Harley Quinn. While technically the version of Harley Quinn from the animated universe could be considered her original and therefore her main version, this depiction of her at least hails from a dceu film instead of where she originally appeared, in the Batman animated series. In the animated film Batman and Harley Quinn teams up with Batman and Nightwing, who are hesitant to turn to her for assistance but really have no other choice when it comes to finding out where Poison Ivy is, as she and the Floronic Man threaten all of humanity. Their evil plot involves turning people into plants. Talk about creating a greener Earth. Harley agrees to join up with the heroes in exchange for Batman's help in getting her reinstated and rehired as a psychologist. And technically this film, I don't even know if we know it's part of the general animated universe, so it actually could be separate from that continuity as well. I don't think it's ever clarified, but it is an animated film, which is why some people consider it part of that continuity and some people consider it outside of the continuity. Number 9. Harley Quinn the animated series. In the Harley Quinn animated series, Harley isn't a saint per se, but she does help to save Gotham when Joker has the city in his grasp, and she also ultimately decides against using parademons to conquer Earth, despite the fact that she is currently crushing the forces of New Gotham and could probably have stood a chance to not just kill Jim Gordon, but also take over the whole planet with her parademon army at the behest of Darkseid, if she was feeling like it. And even though she had been considered worthy of joining Darkseid and conquering Earth in his name. Granted, this was also because Poison Ivy stopped her, but hey, you know, maybe in this reality it's these two women together that bring out the good in one another. Maybe that's also why they make a great romantic couple. Of course, Harley does still classify herself as a villain in this reality and aims to be an even bigger, badder one than her ex the Joker initially, but I inevitably think Harley Quinn still skews more reluctant hero or anti-hero in this universe, even if she might not label herself as such. Even if she's kind of in denial about it, I still see this Harley as a more heroic than villainous version overall. A little bit of chaotic hero, basically. Chaotic good, that's Harley Quinn. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more Harley Quinn alternate lists, or you just want more heroic alternate versions of villains lists, which I'm sure we could do a few more of those, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. Black Label Harley Quinn and the Birds of Prey. In the DC Black Label limited series Harley Quinn and the Birds of Prey, Harley is out for revenge after her and the gang of Harleys Coney Island home, the Dreamin' Seaman, is burned to the ground when Big Tony forgets to keep up payments to their criminal mortgage lenders. Harley is headed back into downtown to try and deliver some payback, but also has to dodge the Birds of Prey and Officer Renee Montoya, who are working together to prevent her return for her own safety. And the Joker, who would very much like to endanger his ex, Harley Quinn's safety. In the process, Harley Quinn helps the GCPD to apprehend the Joker, manages to steal all his and other criminal stolen loot that is in his care, and hands it over to the police, which I'd say are some pretty heroic actions, even though they weren't really the main focus of Harley's visit per se. While this is a story that could fit in with Harley's main continuity narrative, and which I think some people have attributed to that narrative, at least during a certain time in her life, maybe a little few years ago maybe, I usually assume most of Black Label comics are kind of out of continuity and therefore kind of like Elseworld tales that exist in their own pocket universes. So for me at least, this is an alternate tale. Number 7. Injustice Comics. Well, we've talked about Harley Quinn in the Injustice games, which are set in the same universe. There is something that comes up specifically in the Injustice comics that I didn't really get to talk about last time that I felt we needed to touch on just because it is actually so dark and weighty. In the comics, we learn that Harley Quinn and the Joker in this reality had a child together. Now, that is pretty dark in and of itself, imagining these two supervillains as parents. But what's more awful is that Harley Quinn didn't want the Joker to know about the baby. In a sense, she just didn't want to distract or bother him when it came to his main pursuit of his criminal career. So she left for about a year to give birth to this baby. And the Joker apparently never noticed that she was gone. Wow. That's dark. Number 6. DCEU. In the DC Extended Universe, their cinematic universe, we are introduced to a version of Harley Quinn played by Margot Robbie. While Harley definitely has a bad side here, she is also a villain with redeeming qualities. She is smart, capable, strong, and generally she's pretty lucky. The problem mainly with Harley in this universe, as we learn in David Ayer's Suicide Squad, is her attachment to the Joker. And we see that when she finds herself free of him, she ends up on a more reluctant path path that leans more towards anti-hero than just straight up villain. Sure, Harley is still at times selfish, but it's clear that she cares about the general well-being of those who, like her, struggle to find a place to belong. In Harley Quinn and the Birds of Prey, she ends up uniting the powerful heroic group of women known as the Birds of Prey, and turning the DCEU version of thief Cassandra Cain into her own young protege after saving her life, or helping to save her life at least. She fights to defeat the baddies and help save the day, and then she goes on to prove just how noble she can be once again in James Gunn's The Suicide Squad. Number 5. HAYLEY FITZPATRICK. In Thrill Killer, Harley is instead HAYLEY FITZPATRICK, a young teenage schoolgirl who is the paramour and partner in crime of the Joker. Still in this rendition. Though in this universe, her version of the Joker, Bianca Steeplechase, dies. A lot of people die actually in this alternate story, but not HAYLEY. She is one of the few who survives. She ends up being put in therapy following the death of the Joker, as Bruce Wayne hopes she can be saved and redeemed. In the end, HAYLEY is reported missing and has stopped attending her therapy sessions. Bruce notes that he should go looking for her first thing in the morning, as her family is worried sick. His commentary comes at us over top the images of HAYLEY's parents and brother all shot dead, before cutting to an exterior of their family home up in flames, where we can see HAYLEY dressed once again as Harley Quinn. She is holding a gun and dashing away from the burning home with a smile on her face, implying that in this universe, Harley as a teenage girl kills her own family in cold blood. Woo. Number 4. Criminal Sanity. In Criminal Sanity, Dr. Harleen Quinzel starts out as a psychiatrist who is forever changed when the Joker murdered her roommate. Stealing her medical books in the process, he used the knowledge within to become, as he saw it, an artistic serial killer, tormenting his victims with what he had learned. Harleen herself became focused and obsessed on catching the Joker. She ends up joining up with the GCPD, but inevitably leaves when she feels that they are incapable of catching and stopping the Joker permanently, choosing to strike out on her own instead in order to do so. Although, that'll probably be in a part 2 to this story. Kinda ends open-ended, hoping we get more of this. While she definitely does have a darker side in this comic and in this continuity, she ultimately is working to catch the killer known as the Joker instead of joining him. So I think we can definitely consider her to be a hero, even though she's kind of obsessive. Number 3. Echo. In the live-action show Gotham, we get to see into the origin of many characters who are sort of the rogues and heroes of Gotham City, and also sort of not. These are definitely alternates, and in many cases their origins offer different takes on the characters. In the case of the Joker, we have Jeremiah, and in the case of Harley, we instead have Echo. Echo was Jeremiah's loyal assistant even before he lost his mind, but once Jeremiah became a dark and twisted criminal, Echo was so devoted to him that she also chose to follow him faithfully down this path as well. There is nothing that Echo wouldn't do for her own version of Mr. J, and no one who would be safe from her if Jeremiah wished they come to harm, including Echo herself. This is what makes her one of the most deadly and dark alternates of Harley around. Number 2. White Knight. In the White Knight reality, Harley Quinn has become a straight up hero. Here we see Harley Quinn become the sidekick and one true love of Jack Napier, who suffers from a sort of dissociative identity disorder where he also becomes and lives with the persona known as the Joker. Eventually, Harley leaves Jack, but when he gets the help that he needs and is able to escape his Joker side, the two actually come back together. Batman in essence becomes the antagonist of this story, having gone too far when it comes to his mission to put a stop to crime. And it is Jack and Harley who are forced to do something to put a stop to Batman's crusade. In the end, Jack dies, succumbing once more to the darkness of his Joker persona. Batman ends up in prison, and in White Knight Presents Harley Quinn, we follow Harley, who ends up teaming up with the GCPD to catch a criminal, becoming part consulting psychological criminal profiler and part straight up vigilante, doing it all while also working to protect her 2 babies, her pet hyenas that is, and her 2 twin human babies, her children with Jack, conceived before his demise. Number 1. Injustice. While initially Harley started out as kinda one of the baddest of bads in this universe, she does inevitably end up becoming one of the best when it comes to heroes. So good in fact she even ends up joining up with the Justice League. Harley Quinn in Injustice by the end is 100% a hero and ends up allied with Batman when it comes to the split between Bruce, and Clark Kent, aka Superman. Superman of course goes on to become a fascist tyrant and pretty much the villain of this narrative, who rules with an iron fist, where Batman fights for the freedom of heroes and for the freedom of the world, believing that even if people choose to be criminals, they should ultimately get to make that choice themselves. Harley too agrees, believing that people should be given the choice to choose, and like in her case, believes they should also be given the opportunity to possibly change. Because, you know, Harley used to be a criminal, and now she's more of a hero. Number 10. Harley Sin. Harley Sin was one of the applicants to join Harley's gang of Harleys. Her name is Constance Brand. While she didn't end up becoming one of Harley's Harleys, she did still remain in Harley Quinn comics, and for a time was one of her villains. She's less of an exact alternate and more of an obsessed fan with a grudge. Eventually, she and Harley made peace, but recently she has reappeared in the Black Label comic Harley Quinn and the Birds of Prey, where she was seen taking over Harley Quinn's place as the Joker's wannabe paramour. Here she was tasked with proving herself to the Joker by gruesomely killing a bunch of civilians who Joker felt had wronged him, including his mailman and an ice cream man who didn't happen to have Joker's favorite flavor in stock. It seems that she might once again be plotting to take down Harley Quinn, but this time at Joker's side. Number 9. Bizarro Harley. This version of Harley was a miserable version. She was created using Harley's genetic material and LexCorp's Bizarro creating device, or machine. Bizarro had originally wanted a Bizarro version of Lois Lane to be his perfect bride, but instead was willing to settle for his own version of Harley Quinn. Unfortunately, this version, being the opposite of Quinn, ended up being a huge stick in the mud and the exact opposite of fun. Unlike Harley, Bizarro Harley was a very serious and responsible person. Her speak was also a little weird for a Bizarro character, as well as not everything she said was fully reversed. In the end, Harley defeated her Bizarro self by putting her out of her misery and telling Bizarro Harley she was not lovable, trying to get her to prove she was by saying she was having a good time. This resulted in Bizarro Harley exploding because, you know, it's hard for Bizarros to say things like good and nice. But hey, at least she went out with a bang. Number 8. Injustice. While in the end Injustice ends up being a story of redemption for Harley Quinn as we see her become a full-fledged hero, we have to remember where this whole thing starts and why it is that Harley is working towards redemption in the first place. At the beginning of the story, Harley is still Mr. J's partner in crime, meaning she is also responsible for Lois Lane's brutal death at the beginning of this story, and Jimmy's, as well as all of the chaos that ensues afterwards. For all we know, Harley could have even helped Joker create this notorious plot. Also, poor Jimmy. I feel like because of all the crazy stuff that follows in Injustice, everyone forgets about his brutal death. Shot in the head, right through his camera. R.I.P. Injustice Jimmy Olsen. I'm sorry that you died. Always feel bad for him. We all forget about it. Not me, not today. Number 7. Old Lady Harley. Old Lady Harley is a version who exists in a DC alternate future created to parody Marvel's Old Man Logan universe. Here, Harley Quinn as an old lady ends up leaving NYC, but is dragged back to it years later by Red Tool. Tool brings her back to her old pal Tony, who has had her brought back because, well, they need her help. Brainiac 5 attacked the Earth a while ago, creating this kind of apocalyptic wasteland that we're in. However, the gang of Harleys were able to fend him off. Shortly afterward though, they turned on one another, vying for ownership over NYC and dividing up into the gangs of Harleys, who divided up rulership of New York between them. It has finally come down to this final battle, where the winner takes all, and to avoid things getting messy, Harley has been called in to put a stop to this fight, save the Harleys from each other, and win the benevolent rulership of NYC, because obviously Harley would be the best person to rule it. Harley succeeds, of course, and uploads a copy of her consciousness to Cy's old cyborg head, since he himself is dead and not really using it anymore. Using that tech, she's able to guide the Harleys and protect New York, even when she isn't there, freeing her up physically to get the hell out of Dodge and continue on her own adventures. Number 6. Arkham games. In the Arkham video games, Harley became a psychiatrist while training under Dr. Hugo Strange, which is pretty creepy to think about. Unlike most depictions of her as a psychiatrist, she did not this time around seem to have the best of intentions when it came to her patients, but more just a twisted and messed up fascination with the criminal mind. Here it was her ineptitude as a psychiatrist that allowed her to be manipulated by the Joker, not realizing that she was out of her league in treating him, and that he was using her. Dr. Quinzel quickly became obsessed with the Joker, falling madly in love with him, and willing to do anything that he asked of her, becoming his faithful servant who he often. Number 5. Death Metal Harley. Death Metal Harley has an obviously more metal look than her main continuity counterpart, and also gives me some kind of Mad Max vibes as well, which I'm loving. Maybe that's just because she's from the Arkham Wastelands, I don't know. This version of Harley rides around on a motorbike and has a short buzz cut, though still sports her famous red and black hair that we've seen many times before in the comics. She also wears a variation of her Jester suit, but this one is more tactical looking, complete with metal knee pads and of course some badass spikes on the wrists and on the hems of her pants. She also has tons of pouches, which I love. You know me, big into 90s comics, I love my pouches. And she can sometimes be seen wearing a protective clear plastic or glass cylindrical helmet. We recently got a closer look at the Death Metal Harley and learned more about the origins of her massive pet hyena in the Dark Knight's Death Metal guidebook. That was a fun dark alternate, that one. Not so sad or icky. Number 4. Neo Joker. In the series Batman White Knight, there are 2 Harleys. One is the real Harleen Quinzel, and one is an imposter, a fake if you will. The fake version of Harley apparently took over for the real Harley Quinn years ago when the Joker killed Jason Todd. That's when the real Harleen left and Marianne Drews stepped in. The Joker was so preoccupied with his schemes that he never even noticed. When he found himself cured of his psychotic nature and returned to try and make amends to Harley, Marianne was the first version he ran into. Marianne herself was of course also crazy and hated that Jack Napier, formerly known as the Joker, had apologized and promised to make amends for how he had mistreated Harley in the past. This version of Harley, Drew's version, would go on to become the Neo Joker, while Jack himself attempted to become a hero. Number 3. Prime Earth. Since the Batman animated series version of Harley Quinn is technically the original, Prime Earth Harley Quinn oddly enough kinda counts as an alternate. This version of Harley is currently an ally of the Bat family and operates more as a vigilante in Gotham than a criminal. Currently, this is probably the most heroic version we have seen of Harley Quinn in the main continuity of the comics. Harley operates almost as a Batman sidekick following the events of Joker War, and even during that event, if it wasn't for Harley, Batman actually might not be alive today. Harley was the one to help Bats after he was infected with Punchline's special brew of Joker venom, which made him quite sick and caused him to severely hallucinate, struggling to discern reality from deranged fantasy. If anything, Gotham would at least be in a lot of trouble if Harley hadn't helped him. I feel like Batman might still be tripping out. Number 2. AZZARELLO'S Harley Quinn. This version of Harley I think is one of the darkest because she also happens to be one of the most quiet. We never get to read her words or hear her voice in the Brian Azzarello and Lee Bermejo 2008 graphic novel The Joker. Here Harley Quinn is painted as the Joker's solace, his girlfriend and partner in crime. She is mainly seen having intimate moments with the Joker and ruthlessly killing people alongside him. She takes joy in the trail of chaos, bloodshed, and violence that she and the Joker leave behind her though. The closest we get to seeing her speak is seeing her maniacal laughter. Number 1. Harlequin. In the DC animated film Justice League Gods and Monsters, Harley Quinn is known simply as Harlequin and is a serial killer who murders people, chops them up, and uses their parts to make her own version of the perfect family. Batman eventually tracks her down and she fights him with a chainsaw. In the end, however, she becomes injured by the chainsaw herself and attempts to surrender. However, this version of Batman himself is a monster. This version of Batman is the vampire and former scientist Kirk Langstrom. Instead of allowing Harlequin to surrender, he sinks his fangs into her neck, drinking her blood. Number 10. Harley Hyena. In the Batman and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles crossover animated film based on the comic crossover miniseries, Harley found herself transformed into a hyena when the Joker exposed the prisoners of Arkham to a mutant gen that turned them all into all sorts of animals. Harley herself at least became an animal she is usually depicted as being fond of, which is why this point is lower on the list. At least she's still alive as well. I mean, things could be a lot worse. But still, I don't think Harley herself signed up for the hyena life, and seeing all of the inmates as animals, some of which are quite deadly, is pretty twisted and wild. Number 9. Constellation Harley. This version of Harley comes to us from the Emperor Joker storyline, where Joker tricks Mr. Mxyzptlk into giving him 99.9% of his power instead of the 1% content he had originally intended to give him. Now, for those of you who don't condone the way I just pronounced Mr. Mixie's name, by the way, I actually got it from Mr. Mixie himself in the original Superman cartoon, so you're gonna have to take that up with him. I'm trying to do my best to stay true to his name. During Joker's time wielding this massive amount of power as Emperor Joker, he does a whole bunch of wild and crazy things, one such thing being turning Harley into a constellation. Yep. Joker apparently meant this as, I guess, some kind of sweet gesture, but honestly it sounds like some form of mythological torture that a god would use to punish a mortal. I have never been a constellation myself before, but I'm assuming it's not as fun as it appears. Number 8. Dark Prince Charming. This version of Harley Quinn from the Dark Prince Charming series is all kinds of messed up. In this reality, Harley is still with the Joker and is still obsessed with him, despite the fact that he consistently seems to disappoint her and is of course still very obsessed with Batman. In this reality, Batman has a daughter whom Joker kidnaps as part of a plot to both kill Batman and get Harley a big diamond necklace for her birthday. Harley herself at least tries to save Batman's daughter, but she also seems super concerned that this child is trying to steal her man, which is just... it's all kinds of icky, really. To that level of ick, Harley also seems flattered when Joker puts 16 candles on her birthday cake because to him, she'll always be sweet 16. Yikes. If a man said that to me, I'd be like, what? I'd like to be out of this, thank you. Number 7. Steven Sejic Harleen. Sejic's Black Label Limited series Harleen is one of the darkest alternates we've seen of Harley yet, as it allows us to dive deep into Harley's psychology in a way we don't usually get to in comics. In this version of Harley Quinn's origin story, a traumatic encounter with the Joker scars the young psychiatrist for life, forever changing her. She later is given funding for a project which could help in the early detection of sociopathic behavior, granting her access to Arkham Asylum and Black Penitentiary, allowing her to study criminals who were held there. She runs into the Joker and decides to face her fears of him by becoming his therapist. He proved to be the perfect patient, causing Dr. Quinzel to become obsessed and extremely protective of the Joker. Over time, also finding she was falling in love with him, losing her sanity as she became more and more infatuated with her patient. Number 6. Yo-Yo. Yo-Yo is the alternate version of Harley Quinn from the Flashpoint timeline. This version of Harley just goes to show that she doesn't need a typical Joker to continue to be dark. Like her thrill killer counterpart, Yo-Yo works with a female alternate of the Joker. In this reality, her alternate Joker is Martha Wayne, driven criminally insane following the loss of her son Bruce. Yo-Yo here is shown ruthlessly fighting Batman and is the one responsible for helping Martha Wayne's Joker to kidnap Judge Dent's children. So straight away we know that Yo-Yo is a twisted and loyal villainous sidekick who means business and isn't above causing harm to children, or anyone else for that matter. Number 5. Future State. One of the more recent alternate versions of Harley Quinn comes from the Future State reality, which might in ways end up partly our DC main continuity future, but will also likely diverge in enough ways that it'll be considered different. So now this is kind of an alternate reality. Even though before we were promised this would be the main reality. Lies! Lies! I mean, we already know that it's going to be different in the world of Batman, especially because of how the Bat-centric Fear State event went down. In regards to Harley Quinn from Future State, here we see Harley acting more as a hero, who is forced to team up with the Magistrate and Jonathan Crane, formerly the Scarecrow, to help them capture some of Gotham's most deadly and brutal criminals and serial killers. And I gotta say, Harley Quinn's pretty good at it actually. She crushes it. Number 4. Criminal Sanity. Criminal Sanity is a series that comes to us from the Black Label line, and it is overall pretty dark. The alternate version of the Joker in this is also pretty twisted. Harley in this version is a doctor turned investigator after she comes home one evening to her roommate Edie dead in the bathtub. There are also definitely some little similarities to Ivy in terms of Edie's look when she is found in the bathtub dead, which I thought was just an interesting design choice to help readers draw parallels between Harley and Edie's relationship and the close friendship and romance that Harley and Ivy share in the main continuity. Joker is the one believed behind the crime due to his signature trademark being left behind. But in this reality, he also boasts of another sort of trademark. As opposed to it being all smiles, his victims tend to be surgically manipulated in some way, causing them to resemble art. It's like Harley is stuck in a criminal mystery horror movie here akin to the film Seven. Number 3. White Knight Harley Quinn. The other Harley Quinn from this alternate universe has a much brighter story. She is reunited with the love of her life, and now both of them are able to finally be together in a healthier setting, with him being cured. She agreed to help Jack Napier, and the two are married, both promising one another to be better to each other this time around. If you never thought you'd ship these two together, the Joker and Harley Quinn, this is the story that will likely surprise you and how much you actually love their relationship as it is written here. However, this fairy tale ending does not last for Harley. Jack Napier eventually gives into the darkness and becomes the Joker once more. Harley is left alone, pregnant with his twins, which she eventually gives birth to and attempts to raise on her own. In a new series, we'll see a continuation of her story, and this time around it's likely to be more dark. In Batman White Knight Presents Harley Quinn, a new serial killer is out on the rise who seems to be connected to the Joker. The GTO and FBI turn to Harley for help with the case. To protect her children and her city, Harley agrees to help, but in order to do so, will be forced to face her dark past, while juggling motherhood and facing her romantic feelings for Bruce Wayne, aka Batman, who is currently behind bars. Will this alternate be able to look madness in the face once more and survive? We'll have to wait till October to find out. I'm really excited about the series. Hopefully it ends up happening. Please. Please let it happen. Number 2, Batman the Animated Series. It's kind of funny to me that we even consider this version of Harley Quinn as an alternate now, as really this was the original version of her character, as she first appeared in the Batman Animated Series in 1992 in the episode Joker's Favor. But now her comic version has become known as the main, as, you know, comics are usually where we get a lot of inspiration for film and television, not the other way around. Except, I guess, in rare instances like with Harley Quinn. What's so dark about Harley in the animated series? Well, her attachment to the Joker and her mistreatment. This version of Harley is pretty dark as well because it showcases a time in Harley's life where her puddin was everything to her. No matter how many times he hurt or literally tried to kill her, she always came back. And to me, that is both sad and the most dark. Number 1, the Joker. Sort of. In Batman Damned, the Joker is believed dead, which Batman is in the process of investigating, not knowing whether or not he is the one who killed him. During this time, he runs into Harley Quinn, who appears to be doing her best Joker impersonation. This version of Harley is the darkest on the list because of how damaged and twisted she has become here, and she also assaults Batman, which is pretty messed up. Harley genuinely seems to have been so attached to the Joker that she no longer cares if she lives or dies, or who or how she hurts others now that he is gone, expressing as much to Batman before attempting to take him on herself in her own really twisted way. She also is covered in tons of stitches and scars, implying that she has gone through some kind of torture, likely at the hands of the Joker himself.